Welcome everybody to episode 320 of Fergo and the Freak. My name is the Glorious League Freak. I had to go to glorious school to get that title, but with me is the most controversial guest we have, without question. It's Nadine. Hi, Nadine.
Hi. Controversial. Yes, it seems that way recently. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good.
Excellent.
Been an interesting few days in rugby league land.
Yeah, we got a stadium announced that we deserve, quite frankly.
Absolutely. And, we called for it.
We did. It's funny because I saw the Western Weekender. They've been talking about this stadium for a long time, and then Channel 9 said it eventually, and they said it was an exclusive, which was pretty funny. But once again, the Fergo and the Freak podcast ahead of the curve when it comes to the mainstream media. Yeah,
absolutely.
We've got a whole episode. If you go back, I think it was about 8 episodes now, you can see me and Nadine, or you can listen to it. I guess you could see it on some level if you're in the Matrix. But if you want to listen to what we think should be in that stadium, and it's all very conservative from our point of view, go and check it out. But yeah, and the weird thing, or the interesting thing, is that it looks like it's going to be 25,000 to 30,000, which I know you wanted a smaller stadium. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one of the key things is of that amount, how much is corporates / media, because that all gets factored into seating capacities.
Yeah.
Personally, I think at 20, sitting at that 25 is probably better. However, if the intention is for that stadium to become a beacon for other, whether that be, and I know we discussed this the last time we spoke about the stadiums, whether it be for soccer matches or whether that be for, concert events or the like.
Yeah.
I can understand the thought process around having something on the larger side of things. So, obviously Panthers are the anchor tenant for that particular stadium. I know there was quite a lot of discussion last night on Twitter off the back of these reports that, Panthers own the stadium. They don't actually own the stadium. No. Penrith Council owns the stadium and the Panthers are the anchor tenant. So, it'll be interesting to see once it is built, what are the other kinds of events that could be attracted, to the venue itself.
Yeah, and like people probably don't realise it, that there is rugby league being played there almost all the time. Like they play lower grades, they play junior competitions, they play junior grand finals and things like that there. I was actually the water runner in a junior school competition once that was played at Penrith Footy Stadium. So it always gets used for something. But I also think I like the idea of future-proofing it as well. So if you've got a 30,000-seat stadium, like as the Panthers, and I think that when we get our brand new stadium that we thoroughly deserve, that our season ticket numbers will go up and therefore our crowds will go up, and the crowd numbers are great as it is. So I tend to think that if we got a 25,000-seat stadium, we'd very quickly be saying, oh, man, it'd be good if they'd put another 5,000 in here. And the other thing to look at too is that you've got all of this development that's happening in Western Sydney, especially with the airport area and all that sort of thing. And look, if I was the Panthers, I would be saying the West Tigers can get stuffed. We're targeting this area. We're going to try and make it our area. And so that's why I think having a bigger stadium would be pretty handy.
Yeah, it's and that's certainly something that's been spoken about in some of the press releases and media reports since this was announced late yesterday, specifically around the growth for the airport and associated with the airport. But yeah, I agree that if the Tigers are not going to take advantage of that Campbelltown, region, then it's ripe for the picking. I think the other thing that you will see as well is where the A-League season and the NRL season overlaps, albeit very briefly. You could see the Western Sydney Wanderers potentially using that new stadium as well, if there ends up being conflicts in terms of, availability of Bankwest Stadium and things like that as well. But it also gives you another option, if they're looking at doing Pacific tests, if they want to do a sevens comp, it just gives you another option in Sydney that you can host that at, where you don't have the 40,000 seat stadium at Moore Park. You obviously don't need to use the 80,000 seat stadium at Sydney Olympic Park. So you've got Parramatta and Penrith then as some really good options for those kinds of more boutique style competitions.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like a no-brainer to me, especially for a place that is going to be used and to its potential. Like, you look at the Sydney Football Stadium that they're rebuilding at the moment. It's going to be a beautiful stadium that is going to be empty the vast majority of times it's used. And, that's just not going to be the case for a 30,000 seat stadium at Penrith. It is going to be, very close to capacity for a lot of NRL games. And anytime they decide to play it, can you imagine a test match for Australia played at Penrith? They just sell it out.
Oh, 100%. It's really exciting. I know, in the last 10 or so years, they've played some Matildas games out here, and they've been really popular as well. So I think the opportunities, it opens up opportunities, and that's what we don't know. So at the moment, everyone is being quite narrow-minded with regards to their dislike of this particular announcement and why Brookvale or Cogra or Leichhardt or Campbelltown or whatever has appearing to miss out. But what they're obviously not seeing is what are the opportunities that will come as a result of this. I think Campbelltown probably could be the only one that might feel genuinely upset, because I think that would be another growth area and another good opportunity to have, a 20 to 25,000 seater, where you still get, the Pacific Island test would be a great idea. Sevens comps would be a great idea. Particularly women's soccer at the moment, great idea. They've obviously got the soccer team down there as well. So, they could feel a little bit hard done by that. It appears that they're not getting something of this magnitude. But, this has been a decade of negotiations, or a decade plus of negotiations by all levels of government and the Panthers, and perseverance is paying off.
Yeah, and the moves have been in place for a long time. Like, as soon as they said they were moving the trotting track, I knew we were getting a stadium. And the other thing to remember from all of this is that it's very easy. Knock down the Panthers stadium, rebuild it, or rebuild the new stadium next door. I personally, I think it'd be very cool to be playing on the same footprint as the current stadium. I think that'd be awesome. But I don't mind either one.
Yeah, well, from what I understand, that is what will be happening.
Yeah,
which obviously forces Panthers likely to Bankwest Stadium for 2 seasons.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Lead me down the garden path. Yes, I do.
What are they?
I'm not a huge fan of it. I actually think that, given that Bankwest is obviously home to geographically and traditionally the Panthers' biggest rivals, I think that stinks. However, if I look at the bigger picture and I put my business hat on, I can understand why geographically it's the closest, obviously, and that in Campbelltown. Frankly, you're not taking games to Campbelltown because it doesn't have the infrastructure to support, I think, what the Panthers are going to want to do. And taking games to Bankwest also shows corporates and sponsors this is the kind of thing, and fans obviously generally, but this is the kind of thing that you could expect, or you can expect, you will be able to get once the new Panthers Stadium is operational. So it will absolutely be used as a selling point in that regard, as to, come and join us, be one of us, whether it's a member, whether it's a sponsor, with that vision of, this is what you can expect and more from our new stadium in 2025.
Yeah, and the corporate side of things is as important as anything in terms of the preview aspect as well, where like the new stadium that they built at Penrith is going to be at the very least the exact same quality as the one at Parramatta Stadium. If there's slight upgrades and things like that they've worked out in the last few years, they might incorporate those. But the new level that the corporate sponsors and things like that, that's going to be important. And that's going to be a selling feature of, enjoy this at Parramatta Stadium and start getting ready to buy your corporate boxes at Penrith Stadium, because it's going to be even better.
Absolutely. I know this season, from what I've heard, they've basically had to say to some people who wanted to buy, corporate boxes, sorry, we're full.
Yeah.
There's a waiting list at the moment for either corporate boxes or even the open air boxes. They got some open air boxes this season. And obviously that's off the back of a very successful year last year, and everybody wants to be on the bandwagon. I totally understand that. But to be able to not have to potentially turn those sponsors and corporate partners away is a huge advantage. Talking last night at home about this, my 13-year-old daughter said, "Oh, well, I hope they give us better toilets."
Yeah.
That was her biggest issue, was that the toilet facilities at the current stadium are very subpar. So I thought that was very interesting. Obviously, one of my big bugbears is, as most people's are, is food and beverage, and the lack of offering, and how long you wait in line for any of those things is frightening. And you think this season Panthers have sold out every game so far that they've played at home. Obviously there's been reduced capacity, and it's frightening to think that if we were able to accommodate the 18 to 20,000 that the stadium could accommodate, how much worse that would be. It's terrible. So, that will be a massive step up in terms of game day experience for Panthers supporters.
100%. And it's funny because we're trying to get supporters to games, and we talked about this in the last episode, the little things that you think about when it comes to the footy. And even your daughter is like, "Oh man, the toilets are terrible at the football." And if you can remove as many of those things out of it as you can, if you can make the parking good, if you can make the food and beverage good, if you can make the toilets good, if you can make the viewing, there's no reason to not go to the football all of a sudden.
Correct.
It's going to be a very cool, very exciting time. Get there easy, get something to eat, watch a good game of footy, and then go home, and it's easy enough. If you can remove all of those things, you get more people at the games. And that's why I feel like I wouldn't be shocked if the first season there, it's almost a sellout every week, just because people will want to go and check out the stadium. And then when they see, like anybody that's been to Bankwest Stadium just once to watch a game of football, the viewing experience is so unreal that you're like, oh man, I wish my team had a stadium like this, and because I would be a season ticket holder every single year without question. And that's what the new goal is for all these teams. And I understand that there's some teams and supporters of other clubs that are upset, Manly, West Tigers, the Bulldogs even and stuff. The thing they've got to remember is that their teams are shit. And they're ratchet teams in this competition. They're a lower grade, lower class citizens of this competition compared to Penrith. And they don't have the same success. They don't have the same money. They don't have the same supporter base. And they're just not as good overall. And I just hope that all their supporters know that in their soul now.
I feel like I'm talking to Buzz Rothfield.
How dare you? I'm not about to fall asleep.
No, you're calling for all those teams to go into a second-tier competition.
They should. If we relegated the West Tigers, what would we have lost for the last 10 years?
Fodder.
Exactly. Comedy.
Same as the Broncos.
Yeah.
Something for us to talk about.
Did you watch the game last night?
I watched the first half.
Yeah, that's all you needed to see.
Frankly, that was 40 minutes too much, or
Yeah.
30 minutes too much. Although, to be fair, I must say, I thought at halftime, I actually said to my husband, "Oh my God, what are Souths doing? They're only winning 18-0. Obviously, they turned it on in the second half. But the Broncos are basket case is actually too polite of a word, as is dumpster fire. There are some deep-set systemic problems happening in and around that organisation.
Yeah, and I think that this is the only problem I had with Kevin Walters coming in as coach, is that I felt like the Broncos need, almost like when you're flipping a house, you need to tear a lot of the shit out and it's going to look terrible to begin with, but then you start adding to it. And I feel as though because the expectations that have been put on him and, the players that he thought he was going to be building around, a lot of them have chosen to leave for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And the bringing in of Carmichael Hunt, I think, is a huge red flag in terms of they're trying to tread water, and they're treading water in 16th place.
Yeah.
And so what are we doing here? Like, I would rather lose by 48 points with a younger team and see what you've got ahead of you than, losing by 48 points and, Carmichael Hunt's still not the answer, and they're going to get Reynolds next year. And I said this last year, how many more games like this does Payne Haas play before he's like, man, I could go anywhere else, and apart from the West Tigers, and, have something to look forward to and know that there's something really good ahead of me. Because right now at this team, I mean, I look at the Broncos players and I think, man, Xavier Coates is a pretty handy player. Well, he's going. Tom Dearden, I don't know about Tom Dearden yet, but he's already going. There's just so many players in their team. I mean, they lost Fafita last year. Would they pay $1 million right now for Fafita? I bet they would.
Yeah, they would.
And
that's the problem. The Broncos now, and I know we've spoken about this before, and I've certainly spoken about it with a number of people, is they find themselves in the unenviable and unfamiliar position of having to pay overs to get people to the club because nobody wants to go there.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to do with that. It's so unfamiliar to them that they genuinely don't know what to do, which is why everything is so reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
The Carmichael Hunt thing, as you've said, case in point, nobody else wants to go there, so let's bring back somebody else who, is all I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Tevita Pangai Junior has been subpar this year.
Mm-hmm.
Get the right coach, and I'm not saying that Kevy is or isn't for this purpose, but just, in terms of him as a person, you get the right coach for him and he will unlock and he will be a beast.
Yeah.
But so who is that? Is it Kevy? Is it not Kevy? Is it, if Kevy is where the Broncos are putting all their eggs, then make sure that Kevy's got a support team, or at least one of those people knows how to unlock Payne Haas, Tevita Pangai Junior, even, Matt Lodge, if you wanted to hold on to him. Do you know what I mean? But unlock those guys so that they can go out there and be beasts, get that forward momentum going, because at least that shows some commitment. It shows some desire, and it unlocks their potential. The fact that they have said, you can go and look elsewhere next year. If nobody comes to the party, which I don't think will be the case, where does that leave him? You turn around and you think, well, hang on, I'm not good enough to be here. You said I can go and test the market. I don't, I'm not welcome here. So what's that about? And I just find it's fascinating. And I know that, Kevy's come out and said, everybody's under review, myself included, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's all well and good, but are you sacking the entire team? Because unless you are quite literally sacking everybody and rebuilding like you are a brand new club, that statement means nothing.
And the other thing to keep in mind too is that, I know some of them are, but not all players are stupid. And the one thing they do know is rugby league. And if you're someone like Tevita Pangai Junior, and like 3 years ago or 2 years ago, you are in a team that everyone's saying, man, if they keep this team together, they're going to be ridiculous down the road. And now all of a sudden he's playing in a team where they're looking at Albert Kelly and Carmichael Hunt as your halves. And, you had David Fafita and he got out of there. And then they've got Xavier Coates, he got the hell out of there. Tom Dearden, he got the hell out of there. Payne Haas looked disinterested until Origin, and he's come back from Origin, and it's like he's been like, oh, yeah, that's what it's like to play in a decent team, and he's a monster again. Like, if you're Pangai Junior, who would be in demand, like if Penrith signed Pangai Junior, and I know we don't need him, I would be like, we just got to steal. Like he has the ability to be an unbelievable game-breaking player, but he's in a terrible environment right now, and he knows it.
That's right. Exactly right. And this is where people also talk about players who just stay one season or 2 seasons too long at a particular club. Sometimes, and this is totally okay, players need to go to a different system. They need to experience different things in order for them to grow. And that's okay. Don't get me wrong. We all love seeing franchise players, as the NFL would call them. We all love seeing that. But there are times when, there are times, this is a business and people get moved on and move on all the time, as is the case in any other business right across the world. Perhaps what Pangai needs is somebody to help him unlock that. Could you imagine him in Melbourne? Oh my gosh. That would actually be frightening.
Yeah, that would be one of those signings where I'd feel sick.
Exactly right. So look, it's one. I do feel for him because it looks like he's become the face of this clean out. And it's not him. It's not his fault. Yes, he's been lazy this season. I think by his own standards, probably. But what's he got to work with? Yeah. We also don't know what direction is he being given by the coaching staff. What is the role that he is being given on game day to do? All of those things come into play. So, really interesting times ahead at the Broncos.
And you look at who's coached him for his career and you're like, this guy has never had an experienced coach, and he doesn't even know what experienced coaching is at this point. And I agree with you. Like if he ended up, I'd love to see him somewhere like North Queensland alongside Jason Taumalolo, where those two would just be a nightmare.
What a force.
It'd be crazy. And there's so many clubs and that's the thing. You put him in most clubs, he's going to be better for it, apart from the West Tigers. It's just he's going to end up somewhere else, and who are they going to replace him with? Like, is Brad Thorne still able to put on footy boots? Maybe they should bring him back too.
I'm positive last night I heard a call for Corey Parker to put his boots on and get out there.
This is the thing about the Broncos. There's this idea of and it happens with a lot of clubs. I've talked about it before, where they're like, yeah, but we're different. We're special. Oh, let's bring back Carmichael Hunt because he's got that Broncos thing in him. And it's like, you're not special. You're not different. You're in the same competitive environment as every other club. And as soon as you start thinking you're different, you win a wooden spoon.
Correct.
It's crazy. Now, there was a post that was put up by a betting company during the week, and their question was, and it was sent to me by Tyrone. Tyrone's a follower of mine on Twitter and a listener of the podcast, and it had the 2003 grand final team, the Panthers won. And it said how many of that team would make the current Panthers side. I thought it was an ask backwards question because that 2003 team won the grand final. They were not Clive Churchill medalists, but they were JJ Gilton and Shield winners. They won everything. So they're the standard that we're trying to hit right now. So my thought was, how many of our current team would get into that 2003 team, and not just maybe the locks that you would be straight away he would be in the team. Now, it's a really difficult question.
It is a really difficult question. When you look at that 03 team.
It was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous team.
Yeah.
My first thought was I have Cleary in for Gower 100%.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about
that's interesting. And why do you say that?
I think Cleary is a better defender. I think Cleary is a better leader. I think Cleary has a way, way, way better kicking game. I think Cleary is a better playmaker. I think that for our playmaking and kicking in that 2003 team, Preston Campbell was the number one guy, and I thought Gower was extremely overrated in that sense, and I thought he was overrated for the most of his career.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a very unpopular opinion.
That's fine.
You're used to being out on that perch.
Yeah. That's where.
Look, I don't disagree with that. I do think that, and if you're factoring in where they are in their careers at these points in time, absolutely, I totally agree. I do think that Nathan has started developing, and we've obviously seen it this season in particular. We did see it a little bit last year, but this season it's just been next level.
Yeah.
That ability to just slow everything down,
Yeah, and make the game play at his pace.
Oh, he's just the amount of time he has is insane. So yeah, look, for that purpose alone, I agree with that.
Okay. Look at Wesser. I have Wesser.
Absolutely.
Day.
Yes.
No question.
Tick.
And then and the hard one for me was you look at the wingers, Luke Lewis and Luke Rooney.
Mm-hmm.
And To'o is a state of origin player. And I don't know that I can put him in there for those two because Lewis was a rep player, I think, even back then. And Rooney was unbelievable. 2-try scorer in the grand final. I can't.
Yeah, that's a real flip of the coin. And if I'm using the same thought process around where we're, as I did with Gower and Cleary, where are they in their careers? Well, To'o's, this season's obviously been a breakout season. I mean, last year he was a bit hot and cold. This season he's obviously just elevated. I think Rooney you'd absolutely keep in. I would be comfortable, quite honestly, flipping a coin for Lewis and To'o. And wherever it landed wouldn't bother me.
And people, I understand that completely because I think with what Rooney did in the grand final, you cannot drop him. He was, I think at the time he did exactly what you needed him to do. And Lewis was a very good winger, but I think that To'o is at a higher level right now. And I completely agree with you that it's literally a flip of the coin for those two.
Yeah.
With the centres, Girdler stays, doesn't matter what, right?
Yeah, 100%. If only for his looks, let's be honest.
Absolute Cadillac. I mean, I thought I was good looking, okay? If I'm a 9.8, is Gerds a 10?
Oh, Gerds is a 15, and I would even put Gerds in a team right now. It wouldn't matter.
Oh, man. Okay, so Paul Fatuira. I remember when he first got to Penrith, he could not defend at all. He'd become a pretty good defender by the time we were in the grand final. Crichton or Burton, I'd be happy with them replacing him.
I'd put Burton in.
I would put Burton in as well. I think Burton gives you more playmaking, and as a centre, he is unbelievable. He's crazy.
Absolutely. God, honestly, he is, and we've seen in the last couple of weeks, so much better as a centre on that edge.
Mm-hmm.
It's frightening.
He we saw him at 5'8" the last couple of weeks, and he looked like somebody that needed time to get used to the role. He still did some pretty cool things, but as a centre, like if they played him at centre in Origin, I'd be like, great choice. That's how good he's playing. Preston
Absolutely.
Campbell at number 6. I have to stick with Preston Campbell.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Our front rowers were Joel Clinton and Martin Lang. I think Joel Clinton for what was needed back then, and that was maybe his best season. I don't think he had a better season than 2003. I can't get rid of Joel Clinton. Martin Lang was more towards the end of his career at this point.
You've got to have Fish in this team.
And that's what I'm thinking. I think Fish for Martin Lang.
Yeah, Fish has absolutely got to be there.
Yeah. Okay, we agree on that one. Luke Prittis, I can't change Luke Prittis.
No,
he was incredible.
Yeah.
Our back row of Joe Nullavow and Tony Puletua, I can't change them either.
Oh, shit.
It's tough.
Sorry, I'm just looking at this back row, and then I was like, oh, Locke. Oh, no, can't take Sattler out.
Can't change Sattler, no.
No. You've got to have Yo. So Yo's got to be on the bench then.
He'd have to be.
Because you've got to have Yo in this team.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So
the back row, like, are we settled on Nullavow, Puletua and Sattler?
Yeah.
I agree with you. I can't get rid of any of them. So our bench.
What is it with Panthers and being able to just have these rock solid back rows?
It's crazy, hey?
Wow.
It's incredible. Our bench in 2003, Ben Ross, I can't get rid of him.
Yep.
Trent Waterhouse.
Get rid of that guy. God, he knew how to drop a football.
Whoa. See, I was going to say I can't get rid of him off the bench.
So who are our other back rowers? So we've got Yo.
So
just think about this season. We got obviously Yo, Martin, Lenu, Leota, although he plays front row, whatever, Leota.
Mm-hmm.
Capewell. No, I wouldn't put Capewell in there.
No.
So of those other ones, Yo has to get in there. So he has to be on the bench somewhere.
So I think, so our back row, our bench in 2003 was Ben Ross, Trent Waterhouse, Shane Rodney, and Luke Swain.
Yeah.
I feel like Shane Rodney gets replaced by Yo.
Yep.
And I feel like you could replace Luke Swain as well.
Yep.
But who do you replace? Like, do you? I can see a argument for different players. Like, I can see where you put Leota on the bench. I can see where you could pick Kickow, although I think the last few weeks Kickow's been a bludger. But I think that those two you could replace, and that's nothing against those players. They're just 16 and 17 in a grand final winning team, and we're replacing them with starters, basically.
Yeah.
For the most part. That's where we're at.
Absolutely.
Trent Waterhouse, you would get rid of Waterhouse.
Oh, that guy, honestly, he was so good for 3 or 4 shitty errors every game.
He was, yeah. So I think he was.
See, now that I say it, you're like, oh yeah.
But
like Kickow. Honestly, it's like Kickow. Flashes of brilliance.
Yeah.
Absolute rocks and diamonds. Flashes of brilliance. But then what were you thinking? Dropping that ball, going for that stupid offload.
That's where I liked him better as a bench player in this year. Because when he become a starter, I feel like And it might have just been he had more time to do mistakes. But I liked the fact that he was a big dude. He had very good mobility for someone his size. He did have a bit of ball playing in him, but as you say, it was you kept on waiting for the penny to drop and he becomes that player that you're hoping he becomes, and it never quite happened for him.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so... Look, if you wanted to get rid of...
Oh, no, look, I'm happy to... Look, given he actually had a fairly decent season that season,
yeah,
I think we leave him in there.
Okay.
But then we have Leota and Yeo replacing Rodney and Swain.
Okay, so from the combined team and our combined selections, it would be Reece Wesser. Let's go with Brian To'o over Luke Lewis.
Yep.
Okay. Ryan Girdler, Matt Burton as the other centre, Luke Rooney, Preston Campbell, Nathan Cleary, Joel Clinton, Luke Prudis, James Fisher-Harris, Joe Nullavau, Tony Puletua, Scott Sattler, Ben Ross, Trent Waterhouse, Isaiah Yeo, and who was the last one again? Leota. That's it. That side's and
you know what? That is that is almost 50-50 between the two squads.
It's pretty close. Yeah. I tell you, you know what you and me need to do? We need to do our all-time greatest, and we won't do it on this podcast, all-time greatest Panthers team ever.
Oh, wow.
But that's one I know we both need to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't do that on the spot.
No. That will involve a lot of thought.
Yeah, because there's some players that are going to be hard to leave out of those teams. Okay, now on to something different. Do these games over the State of Origin period really count in the NRL?
Well, clearly they count because you get points if you win.
Yes.
However, given that Panthers were so dominant in the lead up to State of Origin and they lost against the Tigers and then chose to still rest their players last week and lost against the Sharks, it appears the conversation is ramping up again. I had Panthers not been as dominant. I don't know whether the conversation would be as extreme as what it is right now.
Yeah.
But as a purist, Origin in the middle of the season is all I know, and I do not mind it being in the middle of the season whatsoever. We obviously saw last year as well that it doesn't work at the end of the season for a number of reasons. So I'm happy for it to stay in the middle of the season. I have long thought, when I say long, I'm probably thinking 3 or 4 years, that pausing the season for 3 weeks, maybe 4, and just pushing through a rep calendar, which incorporates State of Origin, Pacific, test matches of some description, like your Pacific Island nations or your, your tier 2 nations, is the way to go. Because what we are seeing is it is a dilution of the competition. You can't argue that it's not. Whether you are a traditionalist or not, the NRL season proper is diluted through this 8-week period, give or take 8 weeks. So yeah, that's where I think. There's been a lot of discussion obviously about it, and a lot of mainstream media types are saying, well, by not having a regular season game at some point, you're giving a free kick to AFL and soccer and blah, blah, handball and dodgeball, whatever. To me, I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous argument. If you have a properly structured rep calendar through that period, you're not giving a free kick to anybody, and all you are going to do is actually help attract new markets, because all of these, fringe watchers who are like, hey, Tonga's playing, I want to watch Tonga, or I want to watch Jason Taumalolo play for, Tonga. They're the ones that you then get in. So, I think that free kick argument is a moot point, to be honest. It just needs to be if they were to go down this path, it needs to be executed well. That's where I feel it falls over.
Yeah.
Because I have zero confidence that the NRL at this stage would actually end with, the support of the International Rugby League, could actually formulate something that would work well.
Yeah, and it's not complicated.
It really doesn't feel like it's a complicated thing. I've just explained it in 45 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I talked to Rugby League Week Mole, it's going on about a year and a half ago now, I guess, and he was really upset about the effect that Origin had on the NRL competition. And I was, I was fine with it. I thought that there were obviously positives and negatives. But then last year we didn't have that interruption, and it was nice. It was really cool to have these teams just play straight through and not have those disruptions. And the season felt really natural. And that was awesome. And I can't shake that feeling. And of course, people are going to say, well, the Panthers had a great season. Of course you liked it. But just overall, I thought the football was better because of it. The teams were more settled and things like that. I think that there's a lot of merit. And I've always thought that maybe we should have rep weekends and then NRL games between that. The idea of State of Origin taking over for 3 weeks that would be unbelievable. Especially, and if you took it over 4 weeks so that you had some sort of qualification tournament, between the Pacific Island nations and New Zealand, that would be amazing. And what if the 4th week was Australia playing the best team of those? That would be crazy. Yeah. And, this idea of free kicks to other sports, well, there's no free kicks to rugby union. It's dead here.
Yeah.
What are we, free kicks to netball? All right, I'll concede that. The AFL would fucking bend over backwards to pretend that they even had the ability to play proper State of Origin series and test matches over a month. They would love that. They can't do that. There's no free kick there. It would be showcasing what we can do in rugby league, which is have real international games over a month with State of Origin as well. It would be crazy. And if you did that after, say, 9 weeks of the NRL or 10 weeks of the NRL, you play a month of rep football and then it's a straight shot through to the grand final. That's almost the length of season we had last year. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I just don't think, it doesn't work now for a number of reasons. I just think if you talk to people who live in England or those that follow the English Premier League, they are absolutely gobsmacked that we do not pause our competition to facilitate State of Origin. Gobsmacked, because that's what the English Premier League does.
And I see where, it kind of come in that we did it this way, and it's been this way for a very long time, basically since Origin started. But when the NRL was implemented, they kind of did it because they needed to have their cake and eat it too. They had State of Origin, which was still making money, but they couldn't afford to not have club games being played. Now we can, and we're not cutting back a number of club games. Play the same number of club games if you've got to. But, we've got the ability now to do things because the money is in the game. And Absolutely. I think we should do those things.
And, the other thing to think about as well is, all this talk about games on TV and broadcasters and how much they pay and blah, blah, blah. And then the flip side of, minimum breaks as dictated by the collective bargaining agreement and all that kind of stuff. There is no reason why you cannot shorten the regular season, have your rep month, whatever you want to call it, in the middle of the season. You're still going to get, as a broadcaster, you're still going to get the same amount of games, if not more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a player that does not fall into any of the categories that dictates that you play in that month, well, you know, you get a break. So in terms of player welfare, hello, is that not addressing that? So it just, the mind boggles that it's not being looked at in more detail. But as I said, I don't think that the powers that be can facilitate these conversations in the right way to get an appropriate landing point.
Yeah, and like I always was of the opinion that you put, like if you're a sport, you put together your season and then you sell it. You don't sell it and then have the person to buy it put your season together. That's not how it works. You know, the other thing about if we had a month of footy in the middle of the season where we're playing all these international games, we don't then need to have a month and a half at the end of the season just for international games. Like you could have, you know, a team like New Zealand, they might have already played 4 international games. By the time we get to the end of the year, they might only want to play 1 or 2 internationals. And that's fine. There'll be other teams. Australia might still look to tour because they'll have only had 1 international game after that month. But, you know, if just get the games played. And then when we get to the end of the year, if people need rests or teams need to take a break or something, that's cool. They've already played their games. Like they've done it. I think that that's the way to go, definitely, with in terms of having as many rep games as possible, have Origin in there as well, and make it a big, like, representative rounds. It would be incredible. And if we did it all at once and State of Origin was played over 3 straight weeks, no other sport in Australia would matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the quality of football over this last, especially month and a half, I think it's been absolutely crap. And that's taken out of it, the Origin effects and stuff. We're seeing maybe 1 quality game per week that's close, and then another game that's close but has been absolutely horrendous to watch. And the rest of the games have been blowouts, like 30, 40, 50-point blowouts. Do you think that the NRL should be absolutely terribly concerned?
I think it depends on who you ask. I have a feeling that this kind of attacking football is exactly what Peter V'landys wants to see.
Women love it, he says.
It's ridiculous. I dislike seeing games being finished at halftime. And being on the positive side of that ledger a number of times this season, it's frustrating. And it's frustrating for a number of reasons, because if your team happens to be the team that's winning, obviously one of 2 things happen. You either kick on and it becomes an absolute cricket score, or you switch off and you start making fundamental errors and you're like, whatever. And then as a fan, you get frustrated because you're like, what the hell is my team doing? Obviously, the flip side to that is, the counterpoint being that a team plays poorly for the first half and then comes back in the second half and you think, oh, my God, well, where was that in the first half? What's going on here? Blah, blah, blah. I think the crackdown, for want of a better turn of phrase, is, look, I have no idea what is happening with that. It is so it's everywhere. And the problem is everybody wants consistency, and we're never going to get consistency because how you view something and how I view something, or the same incident, is very different. So where I might look at a high shot, for example, and go, oh, you know what, attacking player contributed, fell into it, defensive player I could see was set, et cetera, penalty sufficient, move on. You might look at that and say, no, contact with the head off. And we obviously saw that last week with that ridiculous send-off for the Hetherington of the Broncos variety. And that was just insanity that was that ruling.
Yeah.
But there's the problem. So by the letter of the law, based on the edict that the referees have been given. The referee did the right thing. However, what we are now seeing, and I don't disagree with this, is referees applying common sense and taking into account the situation at hand, which I think is the better way to go. And is that not what was happening pre-Magic Round?
Exactly. And it's...
So it feels like much ado about nothing. We've had all this fanfare. We've lost some big names for a lot of games. We've had players rubbed out of essentially probably the entire State of Origin series because of what took place in Magic Round and the round after. And yet what we're seeing now is almost back to what was happening pre-Magic Round based on certain referees, their level of experience, their level of respect, I suppose, for want of a better word, that the players have for them as well. It's so muddled, and all of that is contributing to these blowout scores. Obviously it's deciding games. Somebody going to the bin for 10 minutes or being sent off is absolutely deciding football games.
Yeah, and teams are getting absolutely thrashed while their players are off the field, and sometimes they're having 2 or 3 players off the field. It's crazy. And it's between that, these 6 again calls, which I know they've dialed them back a bit, but rugby league was never ever meant to be played with more than a 6 tackle set. And I think we're seeing that this year where, the game was dialed in from unlimited tackles. They changed that to 4 tackles, and then we went 6 tackles, and we're like, oh, this is a really good balance. And all of a sudden, we've had a season and a half where teams are having like 18 tackle sets.
Exactly.
And it's not like a penalty stop, you blow it up and stuff, team gets to reset. It's literally 18 tackle sets, and that's not rugby league. That's never meant to be rugby league. And we're seeing, like I was watching the game last night, half watching it after half time because game was over. And, there was a hit up that the Bunnies did off, and it was right near the end of the game. And the hit up off of a kickoff, and the player running the ball back was in a head clash with the defender, and another defender had gone in low and hit his head on his hip. And it's because everyone is stuffed, because they're having to do all of this extra work that the game was never meant to have involved in it. And, I just can't believe that you got Volandis and Annesley running around saying, oh, look, I was right with everything, and the women I don't understand this. The women love it. Like, I don't get it, Anytime you hear somebody say the women love it, they're always a jerk. Doesn't matter what it is in life. They're always a fucking douchebag.
But who are they to speak for the women of the world? And what women?
I don't get it. I really don't get it. I've never talked to a single female that likes rugby league that doesn't love the brutal aspect of rugby league.
Exactly. Because they don't watch it to, watch them play touch football.
Yeah.
We'd watch touch football if that was the case.
Exactly. It'd be the most, popular sport in Australia. And it's not for a reason. I just don't understand the mindset of Volandis and Annesley. They're so disconnected from the game. And the sooner they're gone, the better, because man, they've really stuffed up rugby league really, really badly, to the point where as like diehard fans as you and me are, we're talking about, oh yeah, I didn't watch the second half because it was done and, it was crap. Yeah. Even in games our teams win, we're like, oh yeah, we put in 15 good minutes, game was over, and then it was just rubbish. Yeah.
It's not great.
No. Terrible. I won't keep you any longer. What I mean by that is we've got 15 minutes. We can gas bag before you've got to go. So where can we find you? And I'm going to have you on the podcast again pretty soon. If I can.
Yes. Well, I can be found usually at Panthers Stadium whenever there's a home game.
Mm-hmm.
screaming at somebody.
Or pointing out celebrities in the crowd.
Pointing out celebrities in the crowd, yes. Drawing up schematics for the new stadium.
Yes.
And you'll need to go back and listen to the previous episodes about us talking about the stadium to understand that joke.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at NLC081. And don't forget to check out the Fergo and the Freak podcast Instagram account. So, yeah, still tinkering with the best way to promote new episodes and things like that, particularly given that Freaky likes to punch out a new episode every 35 minutes, it feels like. No sooner have I put up a blast about an episode, there's a new episode. Oh, my God.
I like the way that I was like, you're like, okay, I'm taking over the running of a rugby league podcast account. And then I'm like, oh, here's an episode about the Kokoda Trail.
Yeah. Which was a very good episode. I very much enjoyed the Kokoda track episode. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Mm.
And I'm actually trying to convince my husband to do the Kokoda trek. Not with me. He needs to go by himself. I will send him away. But, really fascinating. So I thoroughly enjoyed that particular episode. But, yeah, so go onto Instagram, like, follow, get all your friends to like and follow. There's been a lot of interaction on there recently as well, which is awesome. So give that a follow. And where can we find you?
You can find me, if I'm not at a Porto, I can be found on Twitter. My handle is @LeagueFreak with no spaces. And, then I guess my website, leaguefreak.com. And if you go to the website, you can see all of the places you can find me from there. It's really simple, although there is a lot of places. But the main one to follow is Twitter. Yeah, the main one's Twitter. I don't really, I post my stuff on Facebook, but that's it. I'm on Facebook for 30 seconds while I post stuff. I don't really get involved in the whole Facebook thing because, it's not good.
It's terrible.
I know. Look, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
We'll get you on in a couple of weeks when we're through State of Origin and we're back to whipping everybody, and we've got the update on what the stadium's going to look like. They're starting to confiscate all of the bronze from people's houses so they can build a big statue of Royce Simmons, and it's going to be so good.
It's going to be amazing.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for running the Instagram account, and we will catch everyone very soon.